Chapter 28. The Dreamcatcher's Path. The stillness of the forest was suffocating as the group gathered near the resting place of the princess. Elowen lay motionless, her form trapped in a deep, torturous sleep. The elves' medicine had calmed her body, but her mind remained locked in a fierce battle against the evil god, an internal struggle no healing could touch. Her brow furrowed, sweat glistening on her forehead, her lips parted as silent screams escaped. The archfey who had led them to the sacred grove stood at the edge of their circle, his ageless features serene, though a deep understanding lingered in his eyes. He watched Elowen's unconscious form for a moment before turning his gaze toward the others. "You cannot save her by merely tending to her wounds," the archfey said softly, his voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "The evil god's grasp on her mind runs deeper than you realize. Only by entering her mind can you break the chains of torment she faces. There is a way, if you are willing to face the depths of her soul." Sir Aldrich stepped forward, his eyes hard with resolve. "What must we do? We will do anything." The archfey nodded, unfazed. "To reach her, to help her, you will need to enter her mind. A delicate process, requiring more than strength or will. It requires trust. The Dreamcatcher will guide you. It is an ancient artifact, a relic capable of weaving the fabric of dreams. But be warned, the dream realm is a place where the god's will holds sway. It will try to push you out, to twist your thoughts. Stay focused, stay united, or you will never return." The group exchanged glances, their determination unwavering despite the apparent risks. "The Dreamcatcher," Lyra spoke up, her voice calm but curious. "What does it do exactly?" The archfey turned to her, his expression unreadable, but his words clear. "It will allow you to cross the boundary between the waking world and the dreamscape where the princess's mind resides. But entering is only the first step. The god's influence will try to turn you against one another, to break your resolve. You will face his will. You must be ready." Selene clenched her fists. "We will be ready." The archfey nodded and raised a hand, his fingers tracing the air as he summoned the artifact. From the soft green light of his magic, the Dreamcatcher materialized in his hands. It was a beautiful object, its frame carved from the finest silverwood, delicate threads of shimmering strands woven into a large oval-shaped net. The threads pulsed with an ethereal glow, like moonlight captured in a web. At the center, a small, radiant gem glimmered, a single tear of the moon, faintly glowing in the twilight of the forest. "This," the archfey said, holding the Dreamcatcher aloft, "is the key. It will allow you to enter her mind, to follow the thread of her consciousness deep into the dreamscape. But beware, this path is fraught with danger. Keep the Dreamcatcher with you. If it falls into the hands of the god, your minds will be lost." He began speaking softly in an ancient tongue, his words resonating like a ritual chant. The air around them rippled, heavy with magic, as though the forest itself held its breath. A warm glow began to emanate from the Dreamcatcher, casting soft light over the group. "Close your eyes," the archfey instructed. "Focus on the princess. Reach out with your hearts. Feel her suffering. Let the Dreamcatcher guide you." As the group closed their eyes, the archfey gently placed the Dreamcatcher above Elowen's heart. Instantly, the magic surrounding it expanded, creating a barrier of light that shielded them all. The pulse of the Dreamcatcher reached into the very air, its threads extending outward, connecting them to the princess's mind. A sensation of floating overtook them, as though the world beneath their feet had ceased to exist. They were no longer in the grove, no longer surrounded by trees. Instead, they were in a place formless and strange, a swirling mass of colours, distant stars tugging at them. "This is it," Lyra whispered, barely audible. "We're inside." Whispers echoed around them, soft and indistinct at first, before growing louder. Elowen's cries, muffled like a song carried on the wind, soon mixed with a deep, cruel laugh that rumbled from all sides. "It's him," Selene said, her voice tight with fear. "He's here." The air shifted, and suddenly they found themselves standing on the shores of a dark lake. The waters were black and uninviting, the air thick and suffocating, the ground cold and cracked. Above them, the sky swirled in a vortex of shadows, black clouds parting just enough to reveal the dark figure before them. A towering shape with multiple eyes, its body shifting like shadows, a presence that made very souls ache. The god was waiting. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, piercing through the mist and into their hearts. "You dare enter my domain?" His voice thundered, shaking the very fabric of the dream. "You think you can save her? You will never escape me." The Dreamcatcher's light pulsed softly, but the god's influence threatened to drown it out. The group stood tall, focusing on each other, on their shared goal, to save Elowen. With a single motion, the Archfey reached into the centre of the Dreamcatcher, drawing upon its power. The threads of magic in the air glowed brighter, weaving a protective shield around the group. The tendrils of shadow recoiled. "You are nothing," the god growled, raising a clawed hand to strike them down. But the Archfey's power was already at work. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the Dreamcatcher, and the world around them shifted. No longer were they on the shore of the lake. Instead, they stood in the middle of a vast labyrinth, walls of tarnished gold and etched stone, their path twisting and turning in impossible directions. The god's whispers surrounded them, urging them to turn back. But they pressed on. Lyra reached out, brushing her fingers against the shimmering threads of the Dreamcatcher's power. "We can do this," she said softly. "We just need to stay together. We need to reach her." Sir Aldrich gripped his sword tightly, his stance resolute. "Let's end this." And so they began the true journey through the dreamscape, their eyes set on their goal, Elowen's freedom. Chapter 28 continued. A nightmare's trial. The dreamscape twisted, shifting beneath their feet as though alive. The ground seemed to hunger for them, threatening to consume them whole. The labyrinth of tarnished gold and etched stone fractured into jagged, dangerous edges, and the air grew thick with an oppressive weight. The evil god would not let them traverse this realm without cost. Every step they took was met with violence, chaos, as though the very landscape itself sought to destroy them. The first trap struck swiftly. The floor beneath them cracked open, fiery pits erupting, flames licking upward to scorch their bodies. The heat was unbearable. The only way forward was to leap over the chasm, but the god was not done. From the cracks in the earth, spectral hands reached out, clawing at them, their fingers burning like molten steel. Lyra reacted instantly, casting a shield of wind magic to scatter the hands into the air, but the danger was far from over. "This way!" she shouted, motioning toward a narrow path beyond the fire. "We can't stay here." But as they ran, the ground trembled again. The labyrinth itself seemed alive with malice. Walls shifted and collapsed, forming razor-sharp spikes that closed in on them from every side. Celine's heart pounded as the pressure built around them, forcing them to run faster, to dodge the falling debris. "Stay focused," Sir Aldrich commanded, his voice steady despite the growing threat. He parried a falling stone with his sword, clearing the path. "We can't let it break us now." A wall of shadow suddenly formed in front of them, solid and impenetrable. But the god was toying with them. More traps, more deaths in the making. Blades of darkness shot from the wall, twisting in serpentine patterns, aiming to pierce them. Lyra moved swiftly, casting a wind blast to scatter the dark tendrils, but they were relentless, reforming again and again, trying to ensnare them in a web of death. "We need to keep moving," Lyra shouted, shooting another blast of magic to clear the way, her face twisted in concentration. At that moment, the ground beneath them trembled violently, and the walls of the labyrinth seemed to collapse inward, forcing them into a narrowing corridor. There was no escape. This was not a place for heroes. This was a place for torment, and the god's voice echoed around them, deep and booming. "You cannot escape," the god's voice thundered. "All of you will die here, just like her. You cannot win. You are nothing in my domain." But the group pushed forward. Sir Aldrich led with determination, using his sword to clear the path, blocking blows from the dark tendrils. Celine, her daggers flashing, danced with the shadows, cutting through the dark forms that tried to restrain them. Lyra, her hands crackling with arcane energy, sent rays of force to disintegrate the shadows that closed in on them. Then, just as they reached the core of the labyrinth, the god's form manifested before them, a mass of darkness, swirling and twisting into a humanoid shape. The figure was formless at first, a tornado of shadows that gradually formed into the terrifying visage of the god, with glowing eyes scattered across his form. The air crackled with corruptive magic. the light dimming in his presence. The god's voice boomed again, mocking them. "You are too late! She is mine! You are nothing but pawns in my game!" Without warning, the god reached out, his shadowy tendrils snaking toward them, each one aimed to kill, to destroy. The battle began in earnest. Lyra was the first to move, her hands glowing with arcane power. She summoned a storm of light, sending bolts of pure magic toward the god. Her spells ripped through the shadowy tendrils, but the god's form absorbed the energy like a sponge, the tendrils regrouping almost instantly. "This thing is endless!" Lyra gasped, her voice shaking as she pushed more magic into her next attack. Sir Aldrich surged forward with a roar, his blade gleaming with righteous fury. With a swing of his sword, he cleaved through one of the god's dark tendrils, but his strikes were like cutting through smoke. The god's body shifted and morphed, evading each strike with eerie grace. Selene, agile and precise, darted forward, her daggers flashing in the dim light. She struck with deadly accuracy, aiming for the shadowed form of the god. She dodged one tendril after another, but they came too fast, and the god's malevolent presence seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. She leaped, twisting mid-air to avoid an incoming attack, but the force of it sent her crashing to the ground, breath knocked out of her. "We need to reach her," Selene shouted, gritting her teeth. "The princess! We need to get to her!" Sir Aldrich grunted in agreement. He knew what had to be done. As Lyra continued to unleash blasts of magic, Sir Aldrich surged forward, his sword cutting through the shadows, pushing deeper into the heart of the storm. His sword found its mark again and again, until, at last, he reached the centre, where Elowyn was trapped in the god's shadowy grasp. The princess was bound, her body twisted in pain, as dark tendrils encased her like a cocoon, pulling her toward the abyss. The tendrils constricted, threatening to drown her in their corruption. With a mighty roar, Sir Aldrich thrust his sword through the heart of the dark mass, slicing through the tendrils that bound Elowyn, severing the chains that had trapped her. For a moment, the god screamed in rage, his form writhing as his power faltered. But just as victory seemed within their grasp, one final tendril shot out like a spear, impaling Sir Aldrich through the chest with a sickening crack of bone. His armour splintered, the force of the blow breaking through him. His body shuddered, breath ragged, as the life seemed to drain from him in an instant. "Sir Aldrich!" Lyra cried, her voice breaking. She tried to reach him, but the dreamscape was shifting again, and the god's form began to collapse around them. With all their remaining strength, they pushed forward. In one final burst of energy, Elowyn's form was freed from the god's grasp. The tendrils that bound her vanished into thin air, and the god's presence began to dissipate, retreating into the shadows from which it came. Elowyn's form fell limp, her breathing shallow, but she was free. The dreamscape began to unravel. The ground beneath them cracked apart, and reality shifted violently as they were pulled from the realm. As they awoke, the world around them came back into focus, and they found themselves back in the sacred grove, lying on the forest floor. But it was not the same. The air felt different, the pressure was gone, and yet Sir Aldrich did not stir. His body lay broken and silent, his mind shattered beyond repair. He did not wake. Elowyn, exhausted and fragile, slowly blinked her eyes open. She was free from the god's influence, but the cost of that freedom was steep. Lyra and Selene looked down at the fallen knight, their faces pale with sorrow.